Good.
All right, welcome. Welcome to the July 10th meeting of the Issaquah Environmental Board. I'm Don McWilliams. I'll be chairing the board meeting tonight. Due to our hybrid format of the meeting, I'd like to provide some guidelines. We'll have participants in the room as well as online. Please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. For those in the room, raise your name card to indicate an interest to speak. And for those attending virtually, please mute your mic when not speaking. And when you would like to speak, raise your hand, please. Do we have anybody tonight for public speaking?
We do have one member of the public, and she has indicated an interest to speak, but we could do roll call.
Okay, let's start with Paul.
Okay. Great. Tom Anderson,
Here.
Nancy Davidson,
Here.
Jamie Finch,
Here.
Raj Kapandi,
Here.
Kiran Pan,
Here.
Mina June has an excused absence, Don McWilliams,
Here.
Dixie Bear,
Here.
Alex Lee Tigner,
Here.
Ann Newcomb,
Here.
Keith Gonzalez has an excused absence, and John Smith.
Here.
Great, we have quorum.
All right, we do have one person online.
Yep.
All right, public comments are important as part of the process. We take them seriously and factor them into our decision making. For members of the public joining us, welcome. When recognized, please unmute your microphone, state your name, address, relationship to the city, and speak clearly and pause frequently. And please limit your comments to 5 minutes.
Great, Connie, you can go ahead and unmute. All right, go ahead, Connie.
I was trying to do camera because you know how camera is. There we go. Okay, my name's Connie Marsh. I live on Squawk Mountain, and I don't want Stacy to fall over in a dead faint, so I hope she's sitting down. So I was going to say I appreciate her taking so much comment on her presentation about the midterm update on the climate action plan. I thought that the council took the clear clue that you need more funding. And they've also been hearing from the people doing the strategic plan that climate action is a priority, which I thought was sort of an interesting tidbit. So at the meeting last night, there was an awful lot of conversation in support of more funding of the climate action stuff, and also concern about what if the law gets overturned. So I thought that went as best it could on Monday night, so I appreciated all of her work. Now I have been pestering you all with emails today because I feel like the environmental board should have review of conservation easements because it directly impacts how well we get to preserve our protected lands. And we have these two conservation easements coming up, one for Bergsma and one for Cora. And they aren't very protective. There's a lot of flexibility in them, and it has me concerned. It is just going to go back to council for review. So if any of you can stand to read a conservation easement and put your legal brains to it to see where you think the flaws are, and if you could provide public comment, that would be awesome. I'm not sure that we can get it actually to your committee, but I'm doing my best. So I sent you some of the information. If you have time in your air conditioning, have at it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Connie.
Great.
Anybody else?
That is the only member of the public tonight.
Okay, sorry, I skipped over approval of minutes. Did anybody have any changes to the minutes? Hearing none. Oh, Connie's hand's still raised. Hearing none, they're approved.
Connie, did you have another comment or can I lower your hand?
You can lower it because I can't lower it. It won't let me.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our first agenda item tonight is proposed increase to administrative fees to support the sustainability fund.
Bear with me for just a moment. All right, little flustered here as we were dealing with the IT issues. One moment. Yeah. All right, sorry, 1 second. Let me just show you that version. Okay. All right, so apologies, this is just the online version, but it should transition smoothly, hopefully. So tonight we wanted to share a presentation that we actually gave to a council committee last night. Ideally, we would have brought this to the environmental board first, but it was just determined in late June that we would be moving forward with this proposal. And the only time we could get on the committee agenda was for last night. What is beneficial is the board is hearing this presentation before this goes to the full council. So you have an opportunity to provide staff feedback and weigh in as appropriate. So this presentation that we provided to one of the council committees last night is on a proposal to change the solid waste administrative fee. What we are proposing to council is that we increase the solid waste contract administrative fee. This fee provides revenue to our city's sustainability fund, which is the main source of funding for climate action implementation, as well as waste diversion programming and projects. What we were seeking from the council committee last night was whether or not they supported that increase from a 6% to a 9% fee to support those projects as shared. Sorry for the scrolling down here. So to provide you all with a bit of background, we did share a little bit about the Sustainability Fund back in June, but this will provide a little bit more depth in terms of how that relates to our waste hauler contract. The Sustainability Fund, as mentioned, does support our climate action planning, projects, policy work, as well as solid waste programming and projects. Revenue from the waste hauler administrative fee is what supports that fund. It is the only source of revenue into that fund. Currently, the administrative fee is set at 6%. This rate went into effect with the new waste hauler contract last year. It is lower than what the city had set the administrative fee previously because the new Recology contract was going to have increased rates, and we wanted to make sure we were having the least impact on our residents with those new fees. Currently, the revenue generates approximately $660,000 per year. And that's approximate because it depends on the number of residential and commercial customers that Recology has, as well as the size of their accounts. So depending on what size bins or dumpsters they have. For the first year of our climate action plan implementation, we relied on a small allocation of city funds, funds requested through council for special programming, and some grants that we were able to secure. In 2023, we were able to accelerate our implementation of ICAP through access to the Sustainability Fund, as well as some additional grants that we secured. In addition to supporting actions around climate mitigation and resilience, as you all know, the ICAP includes a number of actions related to waste diversion. Because of our limited staffing capacity, we had not advanced many projects or programs related to waste diversion the last couple of years, besides what we could do through some limited consultant support. Another piece of this puzzle is last summer, we completed our LEED certification, Leadership in Energy Efficiency and Design. I think many members of, for the new members of the board, Issaquah was the first city certified gold in Washington State. And through that process, we identified a number of limitations in our solid waste work, which really highlighted the need to bring back dedicated staffing to work on solid waste. And that position was hired in 2024. In conversations with all of you, with council, with the community, through our community surveys, we really know that both climate action and solid waste programming projects are high priorities here. And we have developed our plan for how to implement a number of activities and make progress towards our targets over the next couple of years. So based on what we have drafted as a proposed budget for 25 through 26, we know that we can't currently support that work with the existing revenue that we're anticipated to generate through the administrative fee. As you've heard in previous presentations, David and I are pursuing pretty much every grant possible. But as you all know, that takes a lot of resources to do the applications, manage grants, report on them. Our plan is to continue pursuing those grants, but having an additional dedicated revenue source through the sustainability fund will really help us in implementing essential climate and waste work. So that has led to this recommendation for us to increase the administrative fee by 3%, which would jump from 6% to 9%. So what does that get us? A fee increase really supports a variety of climate and solid waste projects and programming. We had in the meeting packet the memo that was provided to council and a fairly developed list of what those programs and projects look like. And I'll touch on a few of them here. Without the fee increase, we'll be able to maintain our ongoing costs, but we will need to cut back on some of the proposed projects and programming. And also we will likely need to spend a lot more of our staff capacity on pursuing grants. On Monday night, as Connie mentioned, council heard about the progress on our actions and targets within the climate action plan. And we really identified the need to accelerate our work and in some cases expand on projects and programming. David and I feel that our proposed budget for the next biennium really does that. So some of what our budget requests for next year look like include capital projects, so solar energy on several city facilities, EV charging for our fleet, as well as a few additional public sites, converting streetlights to LEDs. And then we're also looking at continuing or expanding upon a number of our programs. This includes our residential heat pump program, looking at additional electrification incentives for other appliances, continuing our work with commercial and nonprofit buildings to reduce energy, electrify and increase renewables, and really expanding our efforts around building community resilience in partnership with our emergency management team and community partners. We have a whole suite of other smaller projects and programs we're looking to advance in the next 2 years, but those are some of the more big ticket items. One thing we've also started to do with our budget request this year is identify the linkages between projects and programs and emissions reduction or energy savings, and we'll continue to build that out as that budget request gets finalized for council. So last night, Evan Brumfield from our Public Works team also shared a bit about some of the plans for the solid waste projects and programming over the next biennium. As mentioned, a real benefit is that we've brought Sam Tarvin onto the Public Works team, and she is our solid waste analyst and really focused on these topics. Some of the items that she's looking to launch in the next year include standardizing solid waste resources across city facilities, making sure we have consistent signage, containers to really help educate the community, but also make sure that we are diverting waste in the appropriate ways. Advancing zero waste events and other programming for the communities. Looking at expanding the city's construction and demolition ordinance to have some requirements for tracking diversion. And then also looking at ways to expand opportunities for reuse and repair programs for the community. Those are just a couple of the solid waste highlights from the next budget. So we presented 3 options to the council committee last night, and they did end up supporting the recommendation of the increased fee to 9%. But I do think it's important for you all to understand those other options, because these are fees that are passed down to the residents and the commercial customers of Recology. So our proposed recommendation is moving the fee back to 9%, which is actually where it was with the previous Recology contract. This is about $1.14 monthly increase in the per subscribed service, the most common subscribed service level, and that's the 32-gallon garbage waste bin. That would be about $1.14 monthly increase. This 9% rate would generate $660,000 in additional revenue over the biennium compared to our 6% administrative fee. So that's additional $660,000. Compared to other jurisdictions, 9% puts us about in the middle in terms of admin fee. There is a appendix in the packet that shows where that would put us compared to a number of jurisdictions around Washington. And again, we do feel that, or we do know that the 9%, what we are estimating for revenue from that would really cover a lot of these large projects and expanded programming that we're planning to pursue next year. The other option we put forward was more of a step increase. This would be where we'd move up 1.5% to a 7.5% admin fee in 2025. And then step up again in 2026 to that 9%. This would be to buffer that impact a bit. This would be about a 57-cent monthly increase for that average or most subscribed 32-gallon service level. The impact that this would have to our programming is we would be able to pursue a lot of the planned programming next year, but we would really need to cut back on some programming in 26 because we'd have some less carryover. So this could have impact or a scaled back approach to a lot of our electrification campaigns, commercial campaigns, as well as some of the larger solid waste programming. And then the last option we put forward to council was no change, stay at the 6% fee, no impact to our Recology subscribers. If this is the case, we actually we can cover our ongoing costs next year. We're unable to do that in 26. And those ongoing costs beyond staffing include things like a small budget for marketing and translation and some of our communication needs. So we would need to really scale those back and primarily use those funds to cover staffing and some real basic needs and probably turn a lot of our work to grant writing. So I don't necessarily need to be too repetitive here, but just to wrap this up, essentially the committee last night did support the 9% recommendation, and so that will move to council on July 22nd. We'll be presenting under regular business. We want to make sure the community has the chance to weigh in, since this is a fee that is passed down to all of those with a Recology account. If that does move forward, we will alert Recology by September 1st, and then the new fee would go into effect January 1st. We have the option to change this annually. The committee also did recommend that next summer we review the fee again. I think in some cases, they were concerned that this increase wasn't high enough, and that we wouldn't be able to cover all the programming that's needed. But that's something that we'll reevaluate next year, especially with seeing if the Climate Commitment Act is repealed or some of our major grant sources are pulled back. Is it. So I want to make sure you are all aware of that and provide an opportunity for the environmental board to provide feedback. Again, we will be moving forward with this recommendation July 22nd, but would love to share with the council any feedback, concerns, additional recommendations that the board has. I can take questions, comments, feedback.
Jonathan?
I was just wondering how this fee would be, how the public would get visibility of this increase. Does it come from the city or does it come from Recology?
Yeah, that's a great question. When the Recology, the new contract went in place last year, both the city and Recology did quite a bit of communication. That is something the council committee asked us to do if it is approved, to make sure the community knows what they're buying. So that would likely happen. In the past, we've used inserts with the Recology bill in advance of that change, and then the city would be putting out a lot of communication. One thing we can do to offset that increase is we will also educate the community on how they can reduce their bin size. We did a lot of that with the change in the Recology contract to offset that increase. So lots of communication will provide all those options for how folks can reduce their bill. Communication. Do you have any suggestions too on how any of that?
The solid waste program. This is just an idea how this program that you can do. I walked through Tibbetts the other day after a big softball event, and I was floored at how much single-use plastic containers were everywhere. There were tons of them. And as far as reaching out and educating, there's a great opportunity at these sporting events to maybe set up a table and have a little person, having a person discuss, provide information about using, alternate means to drink water.
Yeah.
Seems pretty obvious, but they all the bids were completely overflowed. But you could educate in that way. You would educate both adults, parents, as well as kids and young adults. You could get softballers, you could kids soccer teams, and I would be happy to volunteer my time to sit at a table and provide some information to people.
Folks, folks joining virtually, can you hear Nancy? I see you. Can you give a thumbs up if you can hear us okay in the room?
We can hear, but it's a little quiet.
Okay.
Okay,
Let's speak up.
try to speak up.
I
To
could
your
only
comment,
hear about
Jonathan.
half of what Jonathan had to say.
I could just summarize. John was providing some great feedback on other ways that we can get out in the community and educate about waste reduction, specifically mentioning Tibbetts Park and baseball, softball, other sporting events, because there's been a lot of overflowing trash bins of single-use plastics there.
And I did take the tour with the group down to the Ecology Center. You were there too, right? And it was a little depressing. I mean, it was, I don't know what your position was, but it was interesting, yet there's a lot of material that doesn't get recycled. Even do their best to do the recycling, it doesn't.
Yes, it's kind of disappointing. Just a quick comment before we move on to Praj. Has the city looked at installing like water bottle filling stations or anything like that at some of the major parks?
Yeah, there are actually, I believe, two at Tibbetts Park, for example. I don't know if they're actually working, and I know there's one at Confluence. We have funding through one of our King County grants to do some more bottle filling stations, but that's something I can raise with Sam Tarvin that we pursue more, and also to work with parks and make sure that those are operational or what we can do to support.
Raj?
So Stacy, few questions here and some comments. So personally, I like the alternate or option two, where, it's a phased approach to increase. Means as a resident, I would like to see the increase phased. One other thing to consider is, the neighboring cities, like I looked at the attachment and the admin fee for Sammamish is 0. There are reasons for that, of course. I read the footnote which says they just have the sustainability coordinator, and I know Sammamish started some of the programs later than Issaquah. Like, I think they just started the East Side, Energy Smart program they just joined. So there are a few things. There is a reason why this fee is there. So, if you're going with the 9% increase, you definitely want to, as Jonathan mentioned, the education will be a big part of it, or communication, that community is aware of it, why there is a big jump. Personally, as I said, I like to see more phased increase, but I wanted to check if you do, and I know you had listed some of the reasons what you would cut down on if you go with the phased approach. But are there any critical items which you will miss if you go with the alternate route?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think some of the items we could potentially cut back on are like more of the public charging. We have to get our fleet chargers in, so that's not really a question. We have vehicles coming, but some of the public charging, we would likely cut back on our residential and commercial electrification programs, continue those, but at a less contribution. Other ones we included were, let's see, some of the capacity support. So right now we're planning to fund another Civic Spark Fellow. Nick his term will end in August, so we're hoping to bring on another one. And then we're also hoping to cover a part of a communications staff. We only have really 2 communications staff that do all our work, and I think David and I probably take up about 50% of their time, it feels like. So we want to contribute to that additional support. And then other big ticket items that we have, we'd probably cut back on our grant funding match. A lot of the grants we apply for want to see at least some amount of match. So our concern with that is it might make us a little bit less competitive. Those are a few of the initial items we would probably scale back, maybe not remove completely, but at least scale back.
So just to give you some input, these are all great, so lot of this work which goes in the background, right, which the Office of Sustainability will do to get the visible programs and actually make it happen for community. So 80% of that background work, which is so important, is not visible to the community. So really, they're not going to care about, in that sense or value, the percent increase for the work, which they don't see. So some of the things which you said, public, the EV charging stations and stuff, that should be, the highlight of the education, because, there were some on electric vehicles, owners got some tax benefits. So a lot of people bought it in 2023, some electric vehicles, end of 2023 or things like that. So these things are important to the community. So you might want to look at, which are the most visible items and highlight them when you're talking about the increase in the tax, because that will get them going and understand why they're being.
Okay, great. Just to very briefly summarize a lot of great points from Praj for those on the phone. Praj was just mentioning the preference for the phased approach to really reduce.
We could hear Praj a lot better.
You can hear?
just for-
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah,
Thank
Praj
you,
is a
Jamie.
lot more
That was
audible.
needed then. Yeah, great.
All right, Tom, I got you next.
Yes, thank you. Just building on Jonathan's comments, the down 4th of July was also a big trash generating event. I contributed to the trash flow, I admit, but anyway, another opportunity be a good community event to try to increase the compostable usage. But my real question is about other sources of funding that may have been explored, and maybe there's a philosophical reason why it was decided to put the sustainability fund entirely on the solid waste um, agenda item there. But maybe you can expand on that, Stacy, if you know some background on that. Like I'm wondering, well, why isn't some of this funding coming from consumers of power, for example? Do we have a little surcharge we could put on PSE energy usage? Seems to be also an important aspect that ties into sustainability. Why is it all on this one revenue stream? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can attempt. That might be also for higher ups in the administration. I know, so there are a couple other fees that the city collects, such as stormwater and water, and those go to a lot of our public works programming. So they are allocated. I would say across most of our neighboring jurisdictions, their funding is coming from the general fund. So I think we feel very lucky here that we do have some dedicated fund, and we're not competing with all the other programming, quote unquote, competing with all the other programming in the city for the general funds. So we're a little bit of a unique situation where I think the city was looking to be proactive, where it had this funding source to support solid waste and environmental programming, and decided to allocate it towards the Office of Sustainability and Solid Waste. So I can look into more of the history. That's about the extent of my knowledge on how those funds became part of this program.
Well, it seems to me, I mean, I'm on board with this, the direction we're going and all, but I think, oh, on a longer term basis, it would be better to broaden the support and cover the energy consumption as well as the waste generation aspect of our behavior to fund this campaign of sustainability. That's I think would be preferable in my opinion. But if doing so means the administrative cost of adding a new fee to some other revenue stream, there's cost doing that. Maybe that's the prohibitive part of it. I don't know. So that's my thought on that. I had one little nit on just the wording of it. You know, a 3% increase in the fee is misleading. Well, I know what you're saying, and you know, the rest of the story explains it. Well, it's an increase from 6 to 9. That's a 3% increase, but it's a 50% increase in terms of what the revenue generated from that is. So I would add more words to clarify what that means. But I know this is just an internal presentation, so that's maybe not important. If this was a more of an outward facing presentation to the public about, oh yeah, we're going to increase our fee by only 3%. Well, make it clear that your bill is going to go up 3% approximately related to this, but the increase of the fee is the revenue stream generated by the city will increase by 50%. I think that's an important way to disclose it, just in the interest of full disclosure.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Tom.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
sorry,
all I had.
One
Thank
quick
you.
response. I think we can definitely look into other funding sources. I don't believe that we're allowed to apply any fees on the energy utility bills. I believe those are set by the state. But David and I were at a conference a couple weeks ago, and I believe it's up in Vancouver, or a neighboring city has a streetlight fee. So there are other things that we could look at and talk with our other programming in the city to see what other sources could be a potential. So thanks for those thoughts.
Okay,
Thank you, Tom. Jamie?
thank you.
Thanks, Don. First, a couple points that are just related to what Tom was just talking about. I actually think that the way that you talk about the increase is confusing in the opposite direction, because until you're at the very end of the presentation, you don't realize that you're, or kind of near the end, you don't realize that we're just going back to what we had before as a percentage. And albeit understand the base rates are different, but I feel like we're kind of burying the fact that it's really just, we had 1 year at 6%, but otherwise the history has been at 9%. So
Yeah.
that seems like something that, like, as we're thinking about bringing this to a broader audience, that should be, I would encourage us to message that. I also think quoting the increase in terms of biennium is both confusing. It like hurt my brain to figure out what you were trying to say, but it also, but it also makes it seem like it's outside. Like it just is. It would seem like it'd be better to put it in terms of the annual amount. I think that's just easier to understand. And it seriously took me like 5 minutes reading that to be like, what does that mean? And what these numbers don't seem to make sense. But then I realized what you were saying. And then on Tom's feedback around funding sources, I think what he brought up is a really important kind of topic, because what I hope we're not doing is just shifting what money would have been coming out of the general fund into a fee that's being put to consumers. Because I do think, and we don't ever say that, but I think we should make sure that we're clear that the city is not going to be, like, the city is also going to be making increased investment. And I think the conversation that you're having with the midpoint check-in around the ICAP is really important context to know that, hey, residents, it's not just you that's going to be paying some additional, it's quite small amount. The city is also going to be committing more funds than we have in the past. Like, that's the type of stuff that I want to know, that it's not just me as a resident footing the bill, that the city is going to be making increased commitments. I also think it's a bit dangerous if we were to become overly reliant on a single revenue source. So I do think that's something that we should just, I don't think that the city's proposing doing that, but that's just something that I think we should be really clear about. And it should be in the messaging for consumers, for like when this goes to council, that should be clear that this is not intended as a way to shift funding elsewhere. I also think Praj's point around what, and it's a little bit different than what she was saying, I think, but like sharing what they're already getting for that fee and being more clear about like, what does this already fund? And like all the benefits we're getting, like, again, as this goes to council, as this goes to a broader group, I think that that would be worth some additional context, and like clearly showing what you're getting and then what's going to be in addition to that. Again, just helps them understand what's the value, how am I valuing this fee in general, and what am I already getting. So then in terms of kind of more feedback on this recommendation overall, I support the recommendation from the city. I do think anything you can do, I thought the bin size decrease, how that messaging can go along with the increase in the fee is a great opportunity to potentially even decrease someone's bill by getting them to do what we actually want, which is to decrease the amount of waste that they're generating, stuff going into the trash. So really, I think that's great. I do think what you're talking about around communication staff, it's not in the current presentation. If there is any specific element of this that is going towards communication staff, that to me is a big thing that I would love to see in here, because I think that's a really important part, and maybe this won't be understood by some of the public, but that seems like such a important element of what we're trying to do with the climate action plan, all of the engagement with the city. So I think that's like another thing that would be great to have included. I do think that one thing that and this is a general piece of feedback that you'll have heard from me before, but I think especially for these funds, we need to make sure that we are like doing as much as we can to get at what is the impact, especially on the climate focused ones. Like what are the, like, and maximizing that kind of tons of carbon to dollars spent. And so the one that jumps out to me is like, I would hope that this doesn't, like, I understand a lot of the grants were tied to kind of equity based paying for entire heat pump systems, but I think we need to make sure that these really are paying, like, are maximizing bang for buck for climate, since that's really the reason that this is getting passed, or this is getting passed through. So I do think because this isn't grant money and because this is the community's money, I think that becomes an even more important element. And then the one final thing that I will mention, I do think one thing that keeps getting kind of lost in the recology conversation, and I don't know that it really has, that this is the right place to inject it, but is the wildlife interaction with our waste streams and the fact that we still have a high percentage of people in basically in habitats where their garbage is regularly being having bears go through it and all, like basically negatively impacting the ecosystems around us that we aren't addressing. So I do wonder if, I don't know that it fits in here, but that's just something that I think we should at least consider whether there's an opportunity as part of this to try to find a solution or improve the situation on how this is impacting the ecosystems around Issaquah. So thank you.
Great. Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie. Anne?
Thanks, Don. Boy, I think you nailed everything, Jamie. So not much to say, but I just want to say I support the 9% increase. I think for the average person, just $1.14 isn't very much. And I think it's like Praj says, it's a perfect way to educate the public on the great things that Issaquah is doing. And, you know, I think most people would be really happy to pay $1.14 a month to get what they're getting. It's a small fee, but I don't live in Issaquah, so I'm on the outskirts. So I don't know how much of I should comment on that, but and then also love the idea of letting people know that it's not all coming from them, that the city is also paying a portion of it. And let's see, there was one more thing I was going to say, but I can't remember what it was. Yeah, mainly, yeah, I don't know what you can get for $1.14, not even a cup of coffee these days, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. So I'll end the comments there. I have one final comment. My concern with this is that it's a creeping tax. Wastewater, water, stormwater, garbage, they're all fee related, right? And it's a little bit here, a little bit there, and every year it goes up and up and up, and it does hit the homeowners. And while it's only a couple percent increase, it might only be $1.15 for a residential homeowner, but what does it cost a big giant business? What are we looking at there? I do think we need to look at alternate funding sources going into the future. I mean, this takes you through 2026, but this is a growing program and it's going to cost more and more over time. So I think you need to consider that. And I think you have support region-wide for a sustainability program. It seems to be a lot of the cities are doing it. There's a lot of support out there. I don't have a solution for you, just something to consider moving forward. Tom, do you have another comment?
Yeah, I guess kind of a combination of response to Anne and you about sensibilities and, well, yeah, this is a small thing and we're all behind this and all that. Well, it turns out we aren't all behind it. And I was reminded of this here just this last week. I engaged in a nice conversation with one of the City of Issaquah Public Works people who came out to my local fire hydrant to bleed it, which is a normal thing to be done. And it just was a good reminder that not everybody thinks alike. And some people see these creeping trends towards funding of climate action things and well, other dimensions of political scenarios that I won't talk about. Is just part of the liberal agenda being foisted upon others. So anyway, to each his own. There are other points of view, and there will be some percentage of the population who consider fees like this to be an outrage. But you know, I'm with it. But yeah, it's good to just keep in mind we don't all think alike about this. So. Kind of being measured in our increases is a good thing. Thank you. That's all I had on that.
Thank you, Tom. Any other comments? I did see you wanted just decision on this. Are you asking for us to vote on this?
It was a discussion. I think it was labeled as a
Okay,
D, I believe, but,
sounds like we're all in agreement that, to get us through 2026, a 3% increase is the right thing to do for now.
okay, and I can, I'll note too, just that there were some that prefer the phased approach. We do in the, agenda bill for council, we'll provide a summary of the environmental board feedback, so I'll note some of these items there.
Raj, did you want your phased approach called out in that?
Yeah. It wouldn't specifically, maybe it would just say in general, they were supportive. There was some, interest in the phased approach to reduce the impact to residents.
And Stacey, I just had one more comment if we had a minute. So when we were all talking about, the education on how much city of Issaquah is actually doing to increase the tax. One way you can do is, I know there was sustainability ambassador or these programs also are kind of funded by the sustainability fund, right? And I know you do have some student interns. So maybe through their work also, they can do the community outreach or education where they actually, and these kids are really good with, like actually making videos and, just the, kind of a small screenshot and putting it in a nice way and just posting it on Instagram, which actually gets a lot of traction among young people. So that is a good way to educate or do the community outreach and actually be aware of why City of Issaquah is charging it.
Yeah, great idea.
So
Okay.
Raj's comment gives me another suggestion. Maybe talk with your staff and see if there's a way you can develop a return on investment type of graphing.
Okay.
Something you can put on your website that says, here's where the money's going, here's what we're getting out of it, here's where we plan to go with it.
When I looked at your list of the things that people were getting from this additional fee, it looked to me that there wasn't much that the average person get. Your average Joe, the streetlight conversion was one that stood out to me that would affect everybody. But the chargers, and things like that only affects the wealthier citizens. So it may not be viewed well by lower income people.
Okay, that's good. And that's something we can emphasize. I think especially our electrification programs will be offering incentives to folks. But we can look at highlighting a few of those that would actually go direct back into the pocket. That's great.
Any last comments? Seeing none. Thank you, everybody. Where we
Park, yep.
So the next item we have is Stacey wants to talk about the process for providing input on the park plan.
Great, thank you. This is a very last minute addition. We were requested this morning to send along communication to the board for providing feedback on the draft park plan, the update to the park plan. And in consultation with Dawn and our clerk's office, wanted to talk to you all about the process for doing that. There are a couple options I discussed with the clerk's office and I'll share those, but also open to other ideas. One option is that you all individually as community members, for those that want to open up the park plan and provide comments, they can do so to the staff and that we just approach it from a individual non-environmental board rep perspective. Other option is that environmental board members could send me their feedback on the park plan. And then I would compile that into a single memo, have Dawn and Alex review and approve it. And then I would send that on to park plan on behalf of the environmental board and representing all of your feedback. Those are the two options we identified. Open if there's other thoughts on how the environmental board wants to provide feedback on that park plan. Just noting the timeline that the staff were looking for that feedback by the July 23rd. So we don't have time for another discussion at a board meeting.
And is it one or the other option, or is there option for the combination of two?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You all are always welcome to provide comments as community members and individuals too. So we could do that, plus folks send it and I package it together on behalf of the environmental board. Is that the combo
Yeah.
you're looking for?
Nancy, Stacy called me earlier and this conversation came to be. My question earlier was, if we have a quorum commenting on the plan, should it go through Stacy to be a formal recommendation on the parks plan from the environmental board? So just to give you guys some context of our earlier conversation today. Nancy? You're
You're
muted.
Yeah, I just had to turn my mic on. Sorry about that. So I guess I have a couple of thoughts and I may come back again. So first off, it's troubling that something that's as important as the park plan has a 13-day turnaround for getting comments back. So I strongly urge that we get that feedback back to the Parks Department. That's troubling for a board that has a large agenda in terms of trying to protect the environment, and parks are a big part of what is going to do that. Secondly, it was also sent out to the community at the same time, and to ask the community in July to turn it around in 14 days, they have one extra day more than we did, is rather troubling as well. It feels like Parks is really not interested in feedback, either one from boards or two from the community. I know that's probably not a fair statement, but it is the worst time of year to be asking for this, and to give people a very short window in something this important is troubling to me. My next point is, I had a chance to take a half hour and go through the plan, and there are pieces that are missing from it, in my opinion, to actually make this the document that we need, that we want to base our funding for in the future on parks. It's the first time we've actually gotten to see the whole vision of where the Parks Department is trying to take this. And I'm troubled that you're asking us as individuals to submit comments when the collective we of this board and our knowledge and input has always provided a better voice than each of us as an individual. So I don't see how we can make that work. So there's a couple options. I mean, if we're just doing our individual voices, we are much better sending them in as the environmental board, because the council actually has an opportunity to hear from a group that has some expertise. If we send them in as individuals, they're less likely to listen as much as it does from the board, because if you read our charter as the environmental board, it basically says they're supposed to provide weight to our recommendations and our discussions. And therefore, if they're supposed to provide that kind of weight, in my opinion, it's important to us to actually look at it, if that's something we choose to do, to provide thoughtful conversations and discussions about it, and give our best input to the city council about what needs to be done with the parks plan. So can we ask for more time? Is that an option? I just think the board needs to come together and do something, and we need to have a conversation about it. That's just my thoughts on it. That's my comments for now. Sorry.
Thank you, Nancy. Jamie?
Thanks, Don. Question for Stacy. What is driving that 23rd timeline? What is the timeline based upon?
Yeah, from the best of my knowledge, it's likely then scheduled to go to the different council committees and then for council approval. I'm guessing that is the driving force. But I can
Okay.
clarify all that, and I will also follow up on Nancy's comment and see if we can get extension and express the concerns about the timeline.
Yeah, it just seems so out of the ordinary for a
Mhm.
major city plan to have. Basically, we had like some initial visioning comments, but for something that is so central to our mission and important to community members, it just seems like a big issue to have this be such a short turnaround. So that's all to say, I agree with Nancy that we really need to look at how and why this is getting pushed so quickly. And I think in the absence of that timeline changing, I would also recommend that we move forward with something as a board, try to get something together as a board, because it will have, I think, more weight. So yeah, a lot of just reiterating what Nancy stated.
Great.
Thank you.
I would agree with both Nancy and Jamie. I think we need to ask Parks, what's the driving force for this? Can we bump it out a month so we have a little longer to look at it? And I do think that, yeah, a board letter from the board is the most appropriate means so that it gets council's attention.
Okay.
Any disagreement with that, anybody? Okay, so if you could reply back to us via email and let us know if we can get that timeline extended, that would be
Yep.
great. If not, I'm gonna ask everybody to take an hour or so of their time and read through it and provide comment back to Stacy, and she'll put a letter together for us. Nancy?
Sorry, I have to turn my mic on. I have to remember to do that. It's not natural. So I guess that's what I was going to ask, and you followed up on that, is what happens if they don't choose to extend it? And so what we're going to do is just provide individual comments. We're not going to try and throw together another meeting to have a conversation about it. Is that the plan?
What I'm hearing, Nancy, is we're not gonna throw together a meeting for it, but we'll all provide comment to Stacy and she'll collate our comments. And then Alex and I will review that letter and have the board review it and then sign it and get it over to the Parks Department and to council.
Thank you.
Great. Yep. I will follow up with Parks team tonight. Get back to you all before the end of the week, as well as any next steps in the process.
Those were our only two topics tonight.
Reports.
On the reports. Karen, do you have a youth report for us?
Okay,
Not tonight? Okay.
great.
Stacy, do you have a ICAP?
Yeah, just a couple last reports and then we'll get you all out of here. So as was shared, we did present the midpoint check-in to council on Monday night. We had a really good discussion with council on the progress so far, as well as our needs going forward. There's several follow-up items that David and I'll be getting back to council in terms of some data, a more detailed report on our clean buildings program. There's also some interest in exploring a few additional policies, especially around waste diversion. So we'll be getting some additional information out to council in the next couple of weeks around those follow-up items. We can share the video from Monday's presentation if you all want. It was long. Can watch it on 1.5 speed. And we had some really nice comments from Ann Fletcher and Dave Kapler were there, provided some public comment on the presentation. So anything, David, put you on the spot? Anything you want to add about presentation?
All set.
All right. And then just wanted to highlight that the meeting packet tonight does provide a number of written reports. Urban Forest Management Plan, just to update on the development of that plan. A facility decarbonization assessment status report. We'll have much more to you all on that in the next month or two. And then a student research paper on carbon offset policies for staff travel. This wasn't completed in time for our June meeting where we had a number of student presentations, but wanted to share with you all the work that Audrey did. It's an initial research project around how the city might consider offsetting employee airline travel. David and I will be digging in a little bit deeper and hopefully putting an internal policy forward later this fall. Environmental Board work plan, our August meeting is going to be a bit of a heavy one. Dan will be here to present to us on the Urban Forest Management Plan. That'll be a draft review. I anticipate we'll want to generate a letter coming out of that meeting on behalf of the board. And then we also have the comprehensive plan review, both on the environmental element, which for those that were on the board last year have seen many times, as well as components of other elements that relate to our work, which folks have also seen. And both those topics, we are hoping to get the materials out to the board a little bit early, because I know they are long and ones that the board will have a lot of feedback on. Our my plan is to potentially, and I haven't discussed this with Dawn yet, but potentially schedule a longer meeting so that we can avoid a special meeting in August. Jamie and Nancy, I think.
Jamie, you had a comment?
Yeah, one just on, I guess it's more of a question for Stacy. Do you know on the urban forest management plan whether they're planning on coming up in addition to like actions? Is there goal setting as part of this? Like, I'm curious if beyond I just think we need to get it, like the 55% canopy to me is one, not achievable, and two, not enough detail below of like what do we actually want to improve forest canopy and ecosystems in the city. So I'm just curious if you know whether that's planned for the urban forest management plan.
Yeah, my understanding is that is part of it. I think also it goes along with Title 18 updates on the tree code, which are also getting at that as well. Those were delayed from tonight until our September meeting. David, I haven't seen a full copy of the draft of the urban forest plan. I don't know, David, if you have any other insight into the level of detail and actions and strategies.
Yeah, I think the thing I can add is I haven't seen, and I have not fully seen it either, but I haven't seen many more, specific targets like 55% tree canopy, but there is visioning process and, vision statements and goals and kind of additional pieces in there that are related to kind of what they really want the urban forest management plan to start achieving. So I know that is also going to be in there in addition to specific actions.
Okay. Yeah, I will have time next month to talk with Dan about this, but I hope that as part of this, it's not just vision and kind of like overarching goal. Like, I think we need to be specific. And one of the slides actually that was related to like tree cover or canopy along riparian corridors, especially along the creeks, I think was a great jumping off point for where I think there's goals and that can get more specific to like how are critical areas being improved as it relates to canopy. So just hope that ends up being a part of it, because would definitely encourage that. And then the other thing that I was just going to provide, and actually, Stacy, I figured it might be a good chance to give people an update on the strat plan task force. Is this an appropriate time, or should I?
Yeah.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Great.
Okay. Just a quick update. So as I think many of you are aware, I've been on a task force that it's a bunch of different board members from all over the city, as well as just kind of other folks from within the city, working on an update to the strategic plan, which is in a nutshell kind of our 5-year vision for the city. What do we want to be working on? What are really the focus goals for the city? And next Monday, there will be a presentation to council. So basically, we've come up with some recommended updates to both objectives and actions. Stacy's been very involved and at several of our meetings. But in a nutshell, the major additions from the last strategic plan, or the first strategic plan that we had, is that there is a lot more focus on climate within the objectives. So that was not really a focus. We didn't have a climate action plan last time we went through this. So that is something that is being added. And then there is a little more focus within some of the objectives on kind of commitment to ecosystem enhancement and focused on urban forest management. So that's another kind of new thing that's coming in. So you'll be able to see a lot more detail and either out of that council presentation, or I'm not sure exactly how that will get shared out, but if anyone has any questions on that, feel free to reach out. But I think I hope that everyone from the board would agree that like some of the major themes that are kind of different in the last 5 years are being echoed by some of what's coming out of that task force. So yeah, please reach out if have any questions or feedback.
Jamie, do you feel the strategic plan is in line with the comprehensive plan coming forward?
So I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, I think it is. That's a bit of a moving target, because I think in some ways, like the strategic plan is needing to react more quickly than the comprehensive plan will. So there's going to be things that are just not contemplated when we did the comp plan update. But like as we're doing the updates as we've gone through the last year, I think they're getting closer and closer. So it's nice that they're kind of being updated around a similar similar time. But yeah, it does seem like generally those are aligned.
My understanding too is the strategic plan will be coming to the boards and commissions in the fall. So I don't have any firm timelines from Dale yet, but it was in the timeline presented to the task force. We'll keep you all
Great.
updated on that.
And one final comment, I do think that while the overarching themes of the update that the task force has put together are generally good, I think there's a lot of work still to be done on like the underlying actions and making sure that we're really focusing the efforts on the right things. So it'll be great for it to come back to boards, because what we're as a board or as a task force putting out, I would not say is like a fully baked, ready to go document. So I think it's a great starting point, but there's still a lot of work to do. So yeah, thanks, Stacy.
Thank you, Jamie.
Couple more quick updates.
Yep.
Just a couple more updates. Since our last meeting, updates on the climate action plan. I don't think we have this information during the last meeting, but Energy Smart Eastside received some additional funding for heat pump installations in adult family homes. This was a special allocation of funding through Department of Commerce. So likely to see installations in 3 to 5 adult family homes in Issaquah. We've also begun public outreach on PSE's electric vehicle pole charging program. As a reminder, they'll be selecting 2 to 4 sites in Issaquah for installations next year. We'll be at a number of additional community events this month. So you'll likely see us at the resource fair or concerts on the green, or PSE staff there as well. And then later this month, we're going to begin outreach on additional electrification incentives that we may be offering to the community through some grant funding and city funds. So these would be incentives for appliances beyond heat pumps. So thinking of induction stoves or hot water heaters, etc. So we'll be starting to do some community engagement on that. And then the last couple items, just to mention council updates. Connie touched on this during the public comment, but last night, and also sent some materials last night, there was a very long committee meeting on transfer of development rights, as well as some updates to Title 18. So you have those materials from Connie today. As Jamie mentioned, strategic plan task force report will go to council next week. That is just an update. And then later this month, council will also hear about update on the transit-oriented development project. This is the one at the Park and Ride just across the way that has been in the works for 10 plus years. And then we'll be presenting on the solid waste administrative fee on the 22nd. And then council will also be having some discussions on budget priorities. So those are all happening over the next few weeks. That's all I had.
Anne, did you have a question, comment?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. So Stacy was generous enough to share all of the great grants that have been received or are secured, and then also ones that are pending. And a lot of them come from the Climate Commitment Act. I was just thinking that, is that something that's visible to the whole environmental board?
Yeah, what we sent was all information that was contained in the ICAP midpoint report. So it was within that report, that longer table. So not just Climate Commitment Act funding, but other grant funding.
Okay.
I can resend that.
So I can find that someplace then.
Yes, I can send that out. I'm happy just to send the ICAP midpoint report back out to the group too.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Okay.
That'd be cool, because you might have made some updates that we didn't see.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a lot. And I just want to say, way to go, getting all those grants and getting all the CCA grants. And I also thought that it would be, it might help all of us see how important it is to protect the Climate Commitment Act. I don't know if I'm allowed to say vote no on 2117, but that's how we can protect it. Because if we don't keep the Climate Commitment Act alive, then a lot of our funding sources are going to be dried up, and it'll be harder to find grants, right? Is that right, David and Stacy?
Yeah. A lot of funding comes through the Climate Commitment Act.
Yeah. Cool. So
One other thing I can say, Stacy, we can connect on this, but we could put the midpoint check-in report in the external share drive for board members. So it can hopefully be easy to find and accessible when you want.
That sounds great. Yep, we'll share out a link and the documents, just because I know a few folks have had trouble with access to that. Great,
Okay.
thanks, David. No, it's a good suggestion.
cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Great.
Great meeting.
Any announcements or reports from the board?
Just one little comment. I was listening to the radio the other day. A story on NPR this week about Bellevue, Washington's canopy preservation plan. I don't know if anybody heard it, but you could probably, if you haven't, you could probably call it up on this here. Might have been presented by Anna King.
Okay. I'll try and find that. I can send it out to the board. I didn't hear it, so. Great.
All right, with that, thank you, everybody. Nice meeting, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you all.
What Jamie was saying, like 55%.